Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I believe that you saw yesterday's video about my first round of the tournament. In this video I will analyze my second round of the tournament, played with black pieces this time, and without further ado, let's start with the game immediately. So, as you can tell, I was playing Pola Simon rated around 1900, quite a lower rated opponent, but you know, when they are younger you always have to be worried about it. So I also don't know what to play against such guys. I was playing a girl that is perhaps related to one of the best juniors in Poland, therefore I expected her to know a lot of theory, to be honest, so I did not want to go into the Sicilian, into many openings I normally play, so I decided to play simply e4 d6. Not really going into the Pierce defense, but rather transposing to the some kind of the Philidor's defense, if you can tell, because if you consider a move like this, then you can get the Philidor's defense with the structure similar to this one. So that was the idea for the game. I went with d6 move, knight f6 and e5. Obviously taking here and there, it's not that great for white, even though it's tempting, mostly due to the fact that I didn't castle does not mean that much because the queens are off the board, so that's okay. And I hoped to play such position without much fury to it. However, my opponent decided to play knight g2 e2, and it was already a surprise for me because usually she opted for the move like knight f3, and then I saw during the preparation that she is not that familiar with the structure itself, so I felt like by playing passively in the beginning I then can get to easily outplay her. However, that was not the case. He prepared either for me specifically or just in general this opening, because she opted for knight g2 e2 that she does not normally play, and then g3 idea. So I was starting to get a little bit worried, to be honest, because I'm not that familiar with the structures. I am not that familiar with the g3 idea. Therefore, I was not that happy with my opening choice immediately, but I just continue with the normal development, which is bishop e7, c6. After a4 stopping the b5, I can play a5, getting the b4 square for myself, and then now she played castle. So she was playing very fast, very accurately, so I decided, okay, she's still in her preparation, I am not in mine. So usually in such dynamic I tend to play maybe something that's not objectively not good, but practically maybe good. So I wanted to go away from the variation because I believe that the normal choice would be to just simply castle, but I didn't want to play simple chess, allowing my opponent to still be in her preparation. Therefore I opted for the move h5. During the game I liked it a lot because I decided that I will play this because, as I've said, my opponent will not perhaps have it in the preparation. However, more I thought about it during the game, the more I thought it's purely a mistake. Why? I was hoping, you know, to get some h4 move and the attack and so on. If the h4 is played, now I can get a g4 square for my knight or for my bishop, so it was also tempting and so on. I felt like it's quite a nice choice, but she played h3. And it's like, what to do now? Because I don't want to ever castle with such a pawn, because if I wanted to castle, I should do it before playing h5. So if I will not castle there, I have also difficulties castling there because I am underdeveloped on the queen side. H3 move stops my attack very well because after h4, g4, this pawn achieved nothing, and f4 is coming, and white will have amazing pawn chain and space advantages and so on. So my attack has finished after one move. My castle is not that safe anymore. So what to play? That was a very big problem of mine. I spent a lot of time here, a lot of time on the next move and then the next move. So I was down on time very much, and I did not like my choices. So that's what you get if you want to be outside of prep, if you want to play some crazy looking move just to get the opponent out of the preparation. You can get into the disastrous position, let's say. So strategically I was not sure what to do, because I remember that in general in those structures you can go for the ed4 knight c5 idea, maybe knight b6 without taking the pawn, maybe even a few other options. I was not sure really what to do. I've calculated quite a lot of variations in general, and I opted for the knight b6 in the end. It might seem a little bit odd, like okay, where the knight is going. The general idea of this move is to try to jump to c4. If white is not cautious after, let's say, bishop e3, I can play knight c4, hitting the bishop, hitting the pawn. If the queen is there, it's even nicer, right? So that's the general idea. Also, I want to make space for my bishop. That was my general assumption, with the ideas maybe that I can try to exchange the knight of white. I was not sure if this is strategically okay because I would waste so many tempos, but I just felt okay, I need to play something. So knight b6 was quite okay for my eyes, so I played it. After which my opponent did not think much about playing f4, and it's very logical because if my knight will go there hitting the bishop and the pawn, the bishop will just not go there, will just stay on c1, protect the pawn, and my knight on b6 seems useless. So once again in this moment I had to think quite a lot about what to do. Also, I knew that knight b6 might be played to then try to push d5 at some point because I have 3 defenders of such a move, so maybe that was that. And I wanted to make it work. So at this point I spent a lot of time thinking whether should I take here or ignore it. And I decided to take on d4 with the idea that then I will push d5. That was my game plan. In general, I calculated both options, taking with a queen and with the knight. Taking with a queen would not be that great perhaps for white because I have knight f to d7 move prepared. I liked it a lot because pawn on g7 cannot be taken. After bishop f6 the queen is trapped and cannot take my rook. And if not queen to g7, I now will be preparing d5 with bishop c5 idea, or on the other hand a move like knight c5 bishop f6. So I like my position more and more. However, obviously at this point taking with a knight seems much more natural, and this is the moment that I have been calculating quite deeply, because d5 move offers you a big upside. For example, if opponent takes the pawn, I can just simply retake. I have no more worries about the space, about the activity and so on. I can simply finish my development and I'm quite alright here. But after e5 there are plenty of moves to come. After knight f5 there are plenty of variations to calculate. So I was really not sure if I can play d5 and I had to calculate a lot. So e5 seems logical. After this move I calculated also like knight e4 try, with the attempt of getting the pawn away, giving the pawn away and getting some counterplay for it maybe, but it was not enough. Obviously white cannot take here because of the h3 weakness, but if they play king h2, protecting the pawn, running away from the pin, my pawn is just lost perhaps with no real compensation for it. So I didn't want to commit such strongly for it, so I would decided to just go back with the knight, and there are two biggest candidate moves for the opponent, which is e6 or knight f5. Both are hitting my weaknesses around the king. My king has not castled yet. I have plenty of problems with the activity, so both moves seems logical. I spent much more time calculating not knight f5 move because I felt like it's much more critical. Why? First of all, I wanted to play simply knight c5, developing my knight, hitting the knight with the idea that after knight g7 king f8 knight is trapped, but it's not, because the knight can take one more pawn on h5 and I'm lost. Okay, so then I've said, alright, if this pawn is weak, maybe I will switch the move order a little bit and I will play g6 first. And then if the knight goes here, now it's trapped, right? But g6 offers not that great situation after knight to d6 check. Very nice move. Not really exchanging the bishop here, but rather playing there. Even though the computer likes this move more, I was more scared about this one, due to the fact that if I take and take, if I castle ever, there will be plenty of weaknesses on the dark squares. Also, e5 has been opened, also this diagonal has been opened, and on top of that I did not like the fact that white has always the idea of playing f5, hitting my g6 pawn, opening my position even more. I felt like I might be even lost here, even though this pawn is not so great here, so I excluded g6 too. So what to play? Then I decided to maybe try to get some breath and play an in-between move with a check to c5. But then I was not sure what to do now, because after g6, once again, knight d6 might be played, and I will be encountering the very same problems that I just talked about. So what, king f8? Maybe, just maybe I'm okay in terms of now. But let's say opponent plays like a quiet move here. What now? It's like my knight cannot move, this knight cannot move, cannot move, cannot move, cannot move, where to move, like I have no idea what to do. An opponent also does not have to go for the killing, for the checkmate immediately. The idea is that my position is very bad practically, very hard to continue. So I decided, okay, after knight f5, bishop f8 will be the move. The idea is that bishop just drops back to the passive square, but at least it's protecting the pawn. The pawn is not weakening itself, and so on. And after knight d6 now, I can now take, and the difference, biggest one, is that I did not play g6 now. So for example, I can either even play knight f6 or c5, hitting the pawn. After some check, I will be able to just go there, and there is no clear way for the opponent to attack my king, while I might have one more pawn. So that was the idea. After bishop f8, I considered bishop e3 move as the most critical one, just simply developing with the idea that if I go knight c4 now, bishop d4, this pawn seems irrelevant. White is really focusing on all the possibilities at this side of the board, so I cannot really take on b2. And if I play a move like, I don't know, knight b6 maybe, then b3 is coming and my knight is basically trapped and so on. So plenty of practical problems. In the end, I decided that I will be playing perhaps the move knight to b8. Seems crazy, I know, but the idea was to hit the knight in any way possible. But still, it's not that clear if I'm better even after a move like g4, takes, because those pawns might be scary. Opponent might try to just maybe drop back the knight or play a move like e6, opening up this diagonal. So plenty of problems. I felt like I am holding just because of some one or two moves that are keeping my position working, but I've spent so much time on it and my opponent did not even go for it. That's usually the case in the classical games. You can calculate and then opponent switches. She played e6 move. E6 move is an okay move, let's say, but I believe it's not that critical, mostly due to the fact that I can simply play knight to f6 now, and after e takes f5, king takes f7. My king is not the greatest, but also I will not be met with any checks, any jumps, and so on. So I felt like, okay, that position is playable enough. So queen d3 was played. I was not sure what's that move about, really. I felt like white should just consider developing moves, not queen moves. Bishop c5 was played, pinning the knight, and now king h1. I've spotted an opportunity for myself now, because I felt like with this move I am not only pinning the knight, but I am also trying to make it work in terms of pressure to the knight itself. And after king h1, even though the king is gone from the pin, I can now play knight e4. The idea of knight e4 is simple. If opponent takes the knight, I can take the knight back and create some pressure to the opponent's position. That's why I felt like even though my opponent just played king h2, king h1, king h2 right now would be the best idea. Losing a tempo, but protecting the g3 pawn, which was very crucial, because for example, if white plays like, I don't know, whatever, I can simply take, and take on g3 with the fork. So king h2 would be a nice way of protecting things, because now I'm not even that sure if I want to exchange. I didn't want to exchange, I want to put more pressure, right? But she took on e4 with the idea that after d takes e4, there is a queen b3 check going away from the attack, and the knight will be also safe in no time. What I didn't see from the distance while I was going for this bishop c5 knight e4 continuation was the variation of takes here and bishop e4. This move I completely missed, and it's a very nice move, because I cannot take the bishop because of the pin, and if I take the queen now, knight will take the queen and knight will be safe too. So at first I felt like I am losing a pawn, I'm getting a lost position, but thankfully after trade I have bishop takes h3. Even though my bishop is hanging, the rook is too hanging, so opponent cannot take my bishop. Or can she? That's the biggest surprise of this game, I guess, because when I was talking about previous choices of my opponent, she could have played many things, it's up to her, but at this point I felt like bishop g2 will be played quite quickly, after which I decided to exchange the bishop, play bishop before, after c3 drop back the bishop, and I felt like my position might be a little bit better because of this amazing c4 square for my knight. So it's around equal, but perhaps in favor of me. But she went with knight c5. The sacrifice that I did not expect. I felt like it's too risky, too scary for her, but she played it. So very nice practical option, mostly due to the fact that I was low on time too. So spicing things up when opponent is low on time, it's usually a good idea. I'm not sure if this was necessary, but here it comes. I had to calculate a lot of variations, right? So obviously I take the rook, she takes the pawn. So she has as of now one pawn for the exchange, the other one is hanging, this one is under pressure, there is the bishop pair, so white has quite a compensation, so it was not easy for me to navigate. I calculated many variations right now. Usually I was hoping for knight to d5 to be working, bishop c4 to be working, rook to a to e8. Basically I was low on time and I've spent like 5 or more minutes calculating this move, with the idea that after rook a8, bishop c6, rook e1 I should be winning and so on. I just missed completely the fork and I've spent too much time on it, guys. So sometimes you have this blurry vision and you miss such easy motives. But anyway, then I've switched to some other moves and I found h4 move as an interesting one. The idea is that if ever opponent takes on h4, I have open h file for my rook, for the second rook and so on, so it might be a very nice way of dealing with the position. Therefore I expected her to play a move like g3, after which I calculated once again many lines, including knight d5 once again, including bishop c4 once again, this time not rook e8, but also the idea of playing h4 g4 was that I can now play bishop e2, hitting the pawn with tempo, let's say. And I've calculated many variations. One of them included giving the sacrifice, the exchange sacrifice back. So bishop c6, bishop g4, check here, takes, rook, knight b5, sorry, and rook d8, trying to penetrate the position. But what I didn't saw during my calculations though was that the king stands in the way because I wanted to play like this and this, but I cannot, obviously. So yeah, not easy position to navigate. I was not sure what to play after g4, whether should I push and then try to give the pawn away that way, or give a sacrifice away as I just shown you guys. I was really unsure. However, once again, opponent surprised me because she did not push g4 but took on c6. Very interesting decision. I'm not sure it's objectively good because I can now just simply take on g3, play g2 with the threat of playing here and there, and after the exchanges I get the position in which I felt like I am not under that much pressure. And also after rook h6, very funny looking move, the knight might have difficulties jumping back because d6 square is taken, this is taken, and after knight c5 I might have rook c6 hitting the knight and the pawn, so it's not that easy for the opponent to jump away. Anyway, she pushed f5 as expected, opening up the attack to the rook, and now I've played rook c6, she played c3, and surprisingly knight is okay here, even though it has no square to jump to. The idea is that the rooks are the pieces that are limiting him, and the rooks are the pieces that will be wanting to attack the knight. So they cannot both attack and limit him at the same time. So that was the problem, that knight has nowhere to jump to, but is safe. For that reason, I decided to go with the simple king f6, king takes f5 idea. I was calculating knight c4 move, which looks tempting due to the fact that I'm hitting the pawn, not allowing the bishop to develop, and also I'm getting this square, so rook c7 is a threat. But I did not like the fact that the opponent might try to push b4 and try to go for the pawn exchanges, because as you may know, if we exchange, let's say, knights, some of the pawns, and we will be left with like rook bishop and a pawn versus two rooks and a pawn. I was not sure when and how will I be able to win the game and when will I not be able to win the game. So I was looking to avoid the exchanges very much in order to obtain more pieces on the board and more possibilities to win the game. So that's why I didn't went for this variation, but I went with king f6, king takes f5. Now opponent went with check, rook f4, which was once again a big surprise for me because I was like, what's that about? I can just simply fork the rook and the bishop, so what's that, right? The idea of this move is a very nice one because she wants to give a check and I cannot go here because of the rook g5 grabbing my knight. After this move something similar might happen, so it's not like I'm getting the rook or bishop anyway. And the idea is that if I move, let's say, to h7, she might try to set up some attack to my g7 pawn. So in general, this rook f4 move, which was a big surprise, turned out to be a very nice move. For that reason, even though I wanted to play this move instantly, I spent some time calculating because I wanted to include this move into my calculation, hitting the bishop and this pawn. However, I once again did not like the fact that she can try to play here, and this pawn seems not that relevant due to the fact that she can take this one. And also I have to be careful because let's say in this variation, if I want to go to f5, now after rook takes c4 and a fork, I might be losing the game. So yeah, plenty of tricks there. I had to be very worried, so I opted in general to play knight d5, drop back the king, and suggest a rook trade. I believe it was the best practical decision because I am getting rid of all the problems with my king, setting up the passed pawn on g5 to win the game for me, but it's not that easy for sure. Takes c4, hitting my knight and activating the pawn. I had plenty of possibilities here, but very long time I decided to simply give a check and go to e6. I believe this is an amazing placement for the knight because it can hit the pawn here, hit the pawn here. Now it's hitting the bishop, so I get the tempo, and also knight from g5 can jump to the king side if needed, if possible, and so on. So amazing square for the knight. Now I gave a check, knight g5, trying to exchange the knight for a bishop while also disrupting the pawn chain. Obviously the opponent does not allow it. She takes the pawn, and after rook b8 she plays a move like king f4. I did not felt like this might be a winning position. I believe that the variation I disliked the most was the bishop c3 move, because after rook a2 there is always f5. After this move there is always like a move like this or this in this instance, and the bishop will be just too good, protecting the pawns, protecting my promotion square, and I felt like it's not winning anymore. So going by the same idea of keeping the pieces on the board, I went with knight f2 move. And the problem for the opponent is that if the knight jumps somewhere, I can now take the pawn and those pawns are not moving forward. So she went with knight to d6, knight d6, yes, and after rook takes b2, at least c pawn might be starting to advance. However, obviously not now yet because I can fork, so king e3 was played. I played to attack the pawn, bishop b6. The idea is that I cannot take the pawn because my knight is hanging, so I gave a check. And once again, very surprising move for me, but very, very nice one. I believe this is the idea I like the most from my opponent, who was playing a very nice game, because I was expecting mostly king to d4, with the king being closer to the pawn, trying to make it work towards the promotion. Then I felt like, okay, I can take the pawn, maybe maneuver my knight somehow, somewhere, and then be able to win the game in the end. King f4 took me by a huge surprise, and the idea behind it is that after I take the pawn, bishop d4 is played. And we know the stuff, guys, right? Bishop is protecting the knight jumps, and my knight is trapped. Very, very interesting idea of the opponent, and now the king will go to the c pawn, helping it to promote. So that's a very nice idea. Not only that, my opponent did not go for this idea which I expected. She went for knight f5. Once again surprising me. All the time surprises, but it's not that uncommon when you are so low on time. It's like you will be surprised all the time. The idea is that if my opponent will be able to take this pawn, I am losing my biggest weapon. I will not be able to threaten her anymore with the passer, with the promotion and so on. So it's very, very, very drawish as of now. So I decided to try to make some tricks and hit the bishop so that the knight cannot take the pawn because the bishop will be taken, and the bishop cannot take the pawn because of some checks. But I tried all the tricks I had up my sleeve, but it was just not working. And then I decided to just simply allow my opponent to take this pawn. And funny enough, I did not go for taking this pawn either, because obviously I could. Let's say at this point I could just go with the king there, kick away some light piece of the opponent, take here, but I don't ever want yet to play a endgame, let's say rook versus bishop or rook versus knight, because let's say, imagine she went there, right? I can get to this position in many ways at many points in the future by, as of now, leaving the pawn. So I decided that leaving the pawn for the opponent might create such a dynamic that she will want to defend the pawn, and maybe she will blunder something. And if that's not the case, I will test her out for like 40 moves. If that's not working, then I will take the pawn, and then I will try to win this game for 50 more moves. As you know, guys, 50 move rule apply here. So that was my idea. So even though I went to c6, I did not want to take the pawn immediately. I was just hoping to somehow outsmart, out-trick my opponent. So first thing that comes to mind is rook to e2 move, because after king f4 I can try king d5, right? Hitting here, hitting here, hitting here, looks fine. However, now there is knight c3 check, hitting this time all my pawns, my pieces, sorry. And if I take, it's like, okay, now I have rook against bishop. But once again, I am not rushing to get this position. I can get to it whenever I want. I want to test my opponent still. So instead of going for rook e2, king d5 continuation, I decided to go for the rook h2 move. Just a waiting move, trying to get more time on the clock. Then I decided to give some random check, get back, play here. And the idea was that if, let's say now I play rook e1, as you will be able to tell, at this point, after king to d5, it's like she's not hitting my rook. She's no, sorry, this way. On e2, in this instance, she was also attacking my rook with the fork. So I had to exchange the knights and go for the endgame like this. If I have a rook on the first rank, she's not attacking my rook, so I can just simply exchange the bishop for the knight. And also this knight is on the edge of the board, meaning that maybe, just maybe, I will be able to get it. But that's not the case. If I started with the move like rook to b1, trying to hit the knight, the problem is that after knight b6, king c5, knight will be always escaping, hugging to the king, let's say, and then I have no way to win this game due to taking the knight. I have to go for this endgame, which once again I have time, I don't have to go for it yet. So I was dancing with my rook, trying to define where I want my rook to be, on e1, e2, e7 or e8 perhaps, in order to then push king d5. So then I spotted the idea that if I will go with my rook to the 8th or 7th rank, maybe it will work better, because at this point if I go here, here and here, maybe in this variation I will be able to attack the knight from this side. But once again, it's not working that well, because knight is escaping anyway. And not only that, I believe you saw this, guys, at this point another fork is coming, right? So the only way for me, when I was deciding where I want to put my rook, here, here, here or here, was to place it on e7, because then I will have more tricks. So I decided to switch to the 7th rank, after which I am not sure if my opponent did it by luck, by chance, or by actually seeing the motive, but the idea was that if she now plays king e5, that I was hoping to see, after rook e7, king f4, king d5, there is no fork here, so she might have to go for this check, and as of now I can take the bishop, and after this move rook a7, knight b6, king c5, and look at this, guys, I am covering the squares with my king, with my rook, so the knight has to go to c8, and now I am getting the knight. This was my whole idea to win the game. But unfortunately, the opponent was staying on the 6th rank. As I've said, I don't know if this was purely luck or did she saw the idea, but she did not allow me to go to e7 with check. That was the problem. Also, if you noticed, eval bar did not went up at this point due to the fact that there is one more nasty trick of knight to d6. Because now if knight d6 is played, I can take the bishop, but there is yet another fork. So as you can tell, plenty of nuances in this endgame, but I wanted to show you them all so that you can say how am I approaching such position, how am I trying to win even though it's a dead draw, and how is this draw working for white. So as I've told you, I was trying to dance around the 7th rank to wait for her to allow me to the e7 square, but she didn't do it. So I went to b7, to a7 and so on. Suddenly I decided, okay, let's play rook d7, right? Because after knight d6, maybe this will be the time that I finally will take the pawn, or I can then try to go once again to the 8th rank, to 1st rank and jump a little bit more. But to my surprise, a big one, guys, she went king e5, blundering rook d5 check with a double attack, allowing me to get the bishop and get the win. It was like very unexpected because she was playing an amazing game from the beginning to the very end, but I guess this is where the exhaustion kicked in because we were playing for like around 4 hours already. This was one of my tactics too for the end game, meaning that I wanted to just tire out my opponent so that she will feel tired and exhausted and not interested in the game, because maybe it will allow me to make her to blunder. So that's what happened basically. 4 hours of working, grinding, and then in the end very simple blunder allowing me to get the bishop for free and win the game. So pretty hard game, to be honest, guys. Plenty of variations of problems, difficulties in the opening game, in the middle game phases and so on. So I was very happy to get this win. And yeah, 2 out of 2, pretty nice beginning to the tournament. After, as you can see, difficulties, it always tastes better. So I was kind of even happy to see such a game going my way. And yeah, that's that. Let's now just see the review. How did it go? I did not check it yet, so let's see. Okay, around 90 seems fair. I believe the most mistakes and inaccuracies happened in the middle game phase when opponent had more opportunities to make my game more difficult, and then obviously the blunder at the end perhaps lowered the accuracy below the 90 points. I'm quite happy with mine. This time 2350, so once again over the FIDE master rating, so I quite like it. And yeah, that's that. Okay, wait, you perhaps did not see the review, right? I covered it with myself, so yeah, that's that. So I believe quite a decent result out of this long and grueling game. And yeah, I believe I did this analysis too deep. It's like twice as long as I wanted it to be. Once again, I'm talking too much, guys. Sorry for that. Hopefully you still enjoyed the video anyway. If so, please leave a like and subscribe for more analysis to come. Hopefully next ones I will be shorter than that, but yeah, it is what it is. The end game was long and interesting, so there it is. Sometimes analysis will be longer than usual. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see each other next video tomorrow. Bye bye.